It was November 2017, and I was desperate. I'd just been laid off from my job at a warehouse. My savings were nearly gone, and I needed a place to live, fast. That's how I ended up in a creaky old rental house on the edge of town. The place was a relic, peeling paint, warped floorboards, windows that whistled when the wind blew. But the rent was dirt cheap, and I wasn't in a position to be picky. The landlord, a grizzled guy named Carl, met me at the door with a set of keys and a half-hearted warning. "Last tenant left in a hurry," he said, scratching his neck. "Didn't even take her stuff." I shrugged it off. People skip out on leases all the time, right? I had no idea what I was walking into. The first night, I was unpacking boxes in the living room, surrounded by the smell of dust and mildew. The house was quiet, except for the occasional groan of the pipes. Then I heard it, a faint tap, 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 like someone knocking on glass. It wasn't coming from the windows, though. It seemed to echo from the hallway leading to the bedroom. I froze, my hands hovering over a stack of plates. Old houses make noises, I told myself. It's probably nothing. But the tapping didn't stop. It came in sets of 3, steady and deliberate like a code. I checked the windows, the doors, even the walls. Everything was locked tight. I went to bed, but the sound followed me, burrowing into my dreams. Tap, 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 always in 3s. By the third night, the tapping was louder, more insistent. I'd lie in the dark, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each set. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm, like someone was trying to get my attention. I started to dread going to bed. The house felt alive, in a way I couldn't explain. The air was heavy, and every shadow seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I called Carl, hoping he'd have an answer. "Old houses," he chuckled, his voice crackling through the phone. "They've got character, just ignore it." But there was a tightness in his tone, like he was holding something back. I pressed him about the previous tenant, but he brushed me off. I tried to settle in, but the house wouldn't let me. The tapping wasn't the only thing. Lights flickered for no reason. Doors I swore I'd closed were open when I woke up. One morning, I found a glass I'd left on the counter shattered on the floor, the pieces arranged in a perfect circle. I told myself it was stress, that I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew better. Something was wrong with this place. A week in, I was searching the basement for a spare light bulb when I found a cardboard box shoved behind the furnace. It was covered in dust, the corners chewed by mice. Scrawled on the top in shaky handwriting was T. Miller. Tessa Miller, I assumed, the previous tenant. My curiosity got the better of me, so I dragged the box upstairs and opened it. Inside was a jumble of personal items, a cracked wristwatch, a dog-eared journal, a bundle of Polaroids tied with twine. The journal was Tessa's. The early entries were mundane, grocery lists, reminders to call her mom. But as I flipped through, they turned darker. She wrote about hearing tapping at night, always in 3s. She described feeling watched, like someone was standing just out of sight. One entry, dated a few weeks before she left, said, "It's not the house, it's her. She's still here." The Polaroids sent a chill down my spine. They showed the house, my house, but the angles were wrong, like they'd been taken from inside the walls. One photo was of the bedroom, my bedroom, with a shadowy figure in the corner. The figure was blurry, but it looked like a woman, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her hands pressed against the wall. My stomach twisted. I shoved the box under the couch and tried to forget it. But that night, the tapping didn't just come in 3s. It was a frenzy. Bang, 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 like someone was pounding on the other side of the bedroom wall. I grabbed a flashlight and pressed my ear to the plaster. The banging stopped. Then, a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood, moved from one side of the room to the other. I couldn't take it anymore. The next day, I started digging online for anything about Tessa Miller. It took hours, but I found an obituary. She died in a car accident 2 months before I moved in, just days after leaving the house. The article said she'd been acting erratic, telling friends someone was following her, watching her. My hands shook as I read it. Was Tessa's spirit trapped here, trying to warn me, or was it something else? Something that had driven her out, something that was now turning its attention to me. The tapping wasn't the only thing escalating. One night, I was in the kitchen making coffee when the lights flickered and died. The house plunged into darkness, and the air turned cold, like someone had opened a window in winter. The tapping started again, but it was different. Slower, heavier, like footsteps circling the house. I fumbled for my phone, my breath hitching, and dialed Carl. He didn't answer. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural hum, like someone whispering underwater. It was coming from the hallway. I grabbed a knife from the counter and crept toward the sound, my heart hammering. The hum grew louder, shaping into words I couldn't understand. I reached the bedroom door and pushed it open. The room was empty, but the humming stopped, replaced by a single, clear whisper. My name, spoken from the other side of the wall. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, the knife in my hand, watching the hallway. Every creak, every gust of wind made me jump. At dawn, I called Carl again and told him I was done. I wanted answers, and I wasn't leaving until I got them. He showed up an hour later, looking like he hadn't slept either. His face was pale, his eyes darting to the house like he didn't want to be there. Over coffee, he told me the truth. The house had a history. Decades ago, a woman named Margaret lived there. She was a recluse, rarely seen in town. One day, she vanished. No body, no note, just gone. Ever since, tenants reported strange things. Tapping, shadows, voices. Carl swore he didn't believe in ghosts, but Tessa's complaints had shaken him. She'd called him the night before her accident, screaming about a woman in the walls. He hadn't rented the place out since, until me. I moved out the next day. I didn't care about the deposit or the boxes still in the living room. I just wanted out. But the last night I spent there haunts me. I was loading my car, the sky heavy with storm clouds, when I glanced at the bedroom window. There, pressed against the glass, was a face, pale, eyeless, with a twisted smile that stretched too wide. It wasn't Tessa. It wasn't human. Its hands scratched at the window, leaving faint marks in the frost. I dropped my bag and ran to the car, peeling out of the driveway without looking back. I've lived in a new place for years now, a bright apartment with no history. But sometimes, when it's quiet, I hear it. Tap, 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 always in threes. It's faint, like it's coming from far away, but it's there. I don't know if it's Tessa or Margaret or something older, something that's been in that house longer than anyone. All I know is it's still waiting for someone to move in, to unpack their boxes, to listen to the walls. And if you ever find a cheap rental on the edge of town, check the history, because some houses aren't empty, no matter how quiet they seem. Back in the summer of 2012, I was 19, scraping by on late-night shifts at a greasy diner in a small town called Millwood. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your business, and the biggest excitement was the Friday night football game. My shift ended at midnight, and I'd walk home to save gas. The main road took forever, winding around the edge of town, but there was a shortcut through the woods, a narrow, gravel-strewn path locals called the Old Hollow. It shaved 20 minutes off my trip, cutting through dense pines and overgrown ferns. People said to avoid it after dark, muttering about bad vibes or old stories, but I figured it was just small-town nonsense. I was young, broke, and too stubborn to care. That was my first mistake. The first few nights on the Old Hollow were uneventful. The path was quiet, just the hum of crickets and the crunch of my sneakers on gravel. I'd keep my flashlight steady, its beam slicing through the dark, and hum to myself to drown out the occasional rustle of leaves. It felt safe enough, like any other walk. But one night, about a week into my routine, everything changed. It was raining, a cold, miserable downpour that soaked my hoodie and turned the path to mud. I was halfway through the woods, cursing under my breath, when I noticed the crickets had gone silent. The only sounds were the rain pattering on the trees and my own uneven footsteps. Then I felt it, that prickling on the back of my neck, like someone was staring at me from the shadows. I stopped, swinging my flashlight around. The beam caught nothing but dripping branches and fog. "Get a grip," I muttered, trying to shake the feeling. But it didn't go away. It grew heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I started walking faster, my shoes slipping in the muck. That's when I heard it, a soft whistle, low and mournful, cutting through the rain. It wasn't random noise. It was a tune, slow and deliberate, like something you'd hear in an old church hymn. My stomach dropped. I called out, my voice shaky. "Who's there? This isn't funny." The whistle stopped for a moment, then started again, closer this time, somewhere behind me. I broke into a jog, my flashlight bouncing wildly. The whistle followed, matching my pace. It wasn't just behind me anymore. It was everywhere, echoing through the trees, weaving in and out of the rain. My heart pounded, my breath coming in short gasps. I told myself it was a prank, some kids messing with me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The tune had a weight to it, like it carried something ancient and wrong. I caught glimpses of movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow darting between the pines, too fast to be human. It was tall, its shape flickering in the dark, like it didn't belong in the light. The path split ahead, a fork I'd passed a dozen times. One trail led home, back to the glow of streetlights. The other veered deeper into the woods, toward parts of the forest no one talked about. I was about to take the homeward path when the whistle surged, loud and piercing, coming from that direction. My gut screamed at me to run the other way. Against every instinct, I turned toward the deeper woods, plunging into the unknown. The whistling stopped instantly, replaced by a silence so thick it felt like drowning. The rain seemed to slow, each drop hanging in the air. I kept moving, my flashlight flickering, its batteries dying at the worst possible moment. The deeper path was overgrown, branches snagging at my clothes. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel it, that presence, trailing me, just out of sight. Then I saw something ahead, barely visible in the fading light. A figure stood in the distance, tall and thin, its limbs bent at angles that made my skin crawl. Its head was tilted, like it was listening or waiting. I froze, my breath hitching. The figure didn't move, but the air around it shimmered, like heat rising off pavement. I backed away, my flashlight sputtering, and bolted through the underbrush, not caring about the path anymore. Thorns tore at my arms, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Somehow, I stumbled onto the main road, the glow of a street lamp guiding me out. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and the forest was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. I stood there, panting, my clothes soaked and my hands shaking. I didn't hear the whistle anymore, but that feeling, the sense of being watched, clung to me like damp cloth. When I got home, I locked the door, checked every window, and sat up all night, replaying what I'd seen. The figure's shape was burned into my mind, its wrongness gnawing at me. The next day, I told my coworker Jen about it. Her face went pale. "You took the old hollow at night?" she whispered, like I'd confessed to something unthinkable. She told me a story I'd never heard, one the older folks in Millwood kept quiet. Decades ago, a man named Allias had gone missing in those woods. He was a hunter, knew the forest better than anyone, but one night, he didn't come back. They found his body weeks later, twisted and broken, his bones arranged in patterns no animal could make. The official report said he'd fallen, but the locals knew better. They said Elias's spirit haunted the hollow, luring people off the path with a whistle. Some swore it wasn't Elias at all, but something older, something that had claimed the woods long before the town was built. I laughed it off, mostly to calm myself, but I never took the shortcut again. I stuck to the main road, even if it meant getting home at 1 a.m. A week later, I was closing up the diner when an old regular, Mr. Hargrove, pulled me aside. He'd overheard me talking to Jen. His hands trembled as he gripped his coffee mug. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer, but he didn't need me to. He leaned in, his eyes wide. "It's not a ghost, kid. It's been here longer than us. It likes the rain. It likes to hunt." He wouldn't say more, just paid his bill and left, glancing at the woods across the street like they might swallow him whole. I quit the diner a month later and moved to the city, far from Millwood and its secrets. I told myself I'd left it behind, that the old hollow was just a bad memory. But every time it rains, I hear that whistle in my head. Soft, mournful, calling me back. It's not just in my dreams either. Sometimes, when I'm walking home late, I feel that prickling on my neck, like something's trailing me, waiting for me to step off the path. Last week, I found a scrap of paper in my jacket pocket, one I don't remember picking up. Scrawled in shaky handwriting was a single word: hollow. I burned it, but it didn't help. Whatever was in those woods knows my name now, and I don't think it's done with me. If you're ever in a small town and hear about a shortcut through the woods, don't take it. Not at night, not in the rain. Because some paths don't lead home. They lead to something waiting, something that's been there longer than you can imagine, whistling its tune, ready to hunt. It was the summer of 2020, and I was stuck in a shoebox apartment in the city, riding out the lockdown like everyone else. I was 27, working from home, my days a blur of Zoom calls and microwave dinners. The world outside felt like it had stopped, and the isolation was eating at me. My only real lifeline was an old landline that came with the apartment, a clunky thing with a coiled cord and a faint staticky hum. I know who still uses a landline, but cell service was spotty in the building, and I'd use it to call my mom or order pizza when I couldn't face another night of instant noodles. It was outdated, sure, but it worked. At least it did, until the calls started. The first one came at 3:17 a.m., about 2 weeks into my lease. The phone's shrill ring tore me out of a dead sleep, my heart jackhammering as I fumbled for the receiver in the dark. "Hello?" I croaked, half expecting my mom or a wrong number. Nothing but static, a thick, crackling buzz like a radio stuck between stations. I hung up, annoyed, and checked the caller ID. It was blank. I figured it was a glitch, maybe the ancient wiring in the building acting up. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, same static, same empty caller ID. I let it ring out, hoping it would stop. It didn't. Every night, like clockwork, the phone screamed at 3:17 a.m., filling the apartment with that relentless buzz. By the fourth night, I was fed up. I picked up, my voice sharp. "Who is this? Stop calling." The static pulsed, then cleared for a split second. A voice, low, raspy, barely human, whispered, "You're not alone." My blood ran cold. I slammed the phone down and yanked the cord from the wall, my hands shaking. I checked every corner of the apartment, closets, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. The locks were secure, the windows bolted. I told myself it was a prank, some creep with too much time on their hands. But that voice, it didn't sound like it came from a person. It sounded like it came from somewhere else. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak in the building. The next morning, I called the phone company. The guy on the line was polite but useless. He said the account was active, but there were no records of incoming calls at 3:17 a.m. Could be a crossed wire, he suggested. Old buildings are tricky. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a sweet older lady who'd lived in the building forever. Had she ever had weird calls? She shook her head, but her eyes narrowed. "That phone's been trouble before," she said, her voice low. "The last tenant complained about it too. He didn't stay long." She wouldn't say more, just shuffled back to her apartment, leaving me with a knot in my stomach. The calls didn't stop. Even with the phone unplugged, it would ring, faint, muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls. I started hearing whispers in the static, words I couldn't quite catch, like a conversation just out of reach. The apartment felt different too. The air was heavier, the shadows sharper. One night, I woke up to find the kitchen faucet dripping, though I swore I'd turned it off. Another time, I found my keys on the coffee table, arranged in a perfect X. I was losing it, jumping at every noise, checking the locks 10 times a night. I started recording the calls on my cell phone, hoping to catch something I could take to the police. When I played one back, the static was there, but the voice was clearer. It said, "Look behind you." I spun around, my pulse racing, but the apartment was empty, or so I thought. One evening, I was moving the couch to vacuum when I noticed a faint outline in the wall. A small, painted-over hatch, barely bigger than a microwave. I'd never seen it before, hidden behind the furniture. My skin prickled. I pressed my ear to it and heard a faint hum, like the static from the phone. The hatch was locked, the edges worn, like it had been opened and closed countless times. I didn't have a crowbar, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to know what was inside. But that night, the ringing was louder, more insistent, and the voice wasn't just on the phone, it was in the room, whispering my name, circling me in the dark. I sat up, clutching a kitchen knife, my eyes darting to the hatch. The whispers grew sharper, forming words. "Open it. See me." I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I called a locksmith. He was a gruff guy, skeptical when I explained the hatch. When he pried it open, a wave of damp, musty air hit us. Inside was a narrow crawl space, barely wide enough for a person. Tangled wires snaked along the walls, and a pile of papers was stuffed in the corner. Among them was a photograph, creased and faded. It showed a man, maybe 30, staring blankly at the camera. His eyes were too wide, too empty, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. On the back, in jagged handwriting, was written, "He listens." The locksmith cursed under his breath. "This isn't on the building plans," he said, backing away. He left in a hurry, muttering about calling the landlord. I didn't touch the papers, but I couldn't stop thinking about the photo. That night, I scoured the internet for anything about the building. After hours of digging, I found an old forum post from a user named DWest88. He claimed to be the previous tenant, a guy named Daniel. His posts described the same calls, 3:17 a.m., static, a raspy voice. He wrote about hearing whispers in the walls, about feeling like something was watching him. His last post, dated a year before I moved in, was chilling. "It's not a prank, it's in the house. It knows I'm leaving." Daniel had vanished after that. No trace, no forwarding address. The forum users thought he'd just bailed on his lease, but I wasn't so sure. I knew I couldn't stay. I broke my lease and arranged to crash with a friend across town. But the night before I left, the phone rang one last time. I didn't pick up, I couldn't, but the answering machine clicked on. Through the static, the voice spoke, slow and deliberate. "You can't leave me." The machine cut off, and the apartment went silent. I checked the tape, my hands trembling. There was no message, just dead air. I packed my last bag and got out, not even waiting for morning. As I left, I glanced at the hatch. It was open, just a crack, though I swore the locksmith had sealed it. I've been in my friend's place for years now, far from that apartment. I don't have a landline, and I never will. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I hear static, a faint crackling hum, like a call trying to connect. Last month, I found an old receipt in my wallet, one I don't remember keeping. Scrawled on the back, in handwriting that wasn't mine, was a single phrase, "I'm still here." I tore it up and flushed the pieces, but it didn't matter. Whatever was in that apartment wasn't tied to the phone or the hatch. It was tied to me, and I don't think it's done talking. If you ever move into a place with an old landline, test it first. Listen for the hum, because some calls don't come from the other side of the line. They come from the other side of something else.